If your scrap yarn is taking over and you'd really just like to use up every precious inch of that yarn that you bought, well, same. I have been on a mission this year to use only the yarn from my stash. And that includes all of those little leftover bits of skeins that you just have no idea what you could use them for. Typically my go-to for leftover yarn and even scrap yarn to some degree is a hat. But I have tons of hats nowadays and I just need something a little bit different, you know? Hats are fun to knit, but sometimes you just need a change. So today I'm sharing some creative ways that I like to use leftover yarn nowadays. Some of them are practical and some of them are just plain fun, but all of them will help you get through those leftover bits of yarn that you have no idea what to do with. So first up, I'm thinking coasters and mug rugs. These are one of those practical projects for more ways than just one. Obviously, a coaster is something very practical and very useful in your home, but it's also a really great way to test out different stitch patterns or a creative way to use your gauge swatches. Now, of course, if you go to Pinterest or Ravelry or anything like that, you'll find an assortment of patterns for coasters and that sort of thing. But also, if you have a stitch book or you like looking up knit stitches on YouTube or something like that, and you just want to try and practice a stitch, maybe grab some cotton yarn from your stash that you need to work through, those little leftover bits of cotton, and just knit it into maybe a 3x3 square, and you have yourself a perfect little coaster that's very absorbent because it's cotton, but you've also been able to play around with that new stitch pattern that you've been really interested to try. Now, if you or anyone you love is really into reading, bookmarks are another perfect use for leftover bits of yarn, especially when you only have like a tiny little scrap left. You can knit a bookmark with just a few yards of yarn. It's another one of those instances where you can practice and play with different stitch patterns, but on a much smaller scale even than a coaster or a mug rug. And it's just a great, quick little win project. You can whip one of these up in just a matter of minutes. So once again, if you search on Pinterest or Ravelry for knit bookmarks, you'll find tons and tons of patterns available. But again, if you find a stitch pattern that you like or that you want to play around with, you don't really need a pattern. You can just sort of improvise and make up your own. Now here's another good and clever use for some cotton yarn that you might have left over. Washcloths and face scrubbies. Now these are two different size projects. Obviously it's going to take a little bit longer to knit up a washcloth than like a face scrubby, but you can pick and choose based on the amount of leftovers that you have. So a washcloth, again, for me is just an oversized swatch. I typically will knit a washcloth around 8.5 inches by 8.5 inches. That's a pretty good size for me. I do have a free pattern available for a super beginner friendly, very easy and quick to knit washcloth. I'll have that linked in the description below. But again, it's one of those projects where you can really play around with some stitch patterns that you've been wanting to try. Just make your swatch a little bit bigger and you've got this perfectly functional washcloth in the end. Now face scrubbies is another one of those things too. You can knit an even smaller square than a washcloth if you have fewer yards of that leftover yarn, and maybe like a bumpy or a textured stitch pattern. That would be great for scrubbing your face. Again, I typically like to use 100% cotton for these types of projects because it's durable, it's washable, it's absorbent, and it dries really well. So those are my go-tos for cotton yarns leftovers that I have in my stash. Next up, we have garlands or buntings. And this is one of my favorite projects to use for those leftover bits of that super bulky weight yarn that I have. You can knit just a simple I-cord and turn it into garland for your tree during the holidays. You can knit up one that's a little bit shorter if you don't have a ton of yarn and just turn it into like a cute little decoration for your mantle. You can knit these up with scraps and use them as bag handles. I mean, there's all kinds of things that you can do with a knit I-cord. Now you could take it a step farther if you have a little bit of extra scraps. Knit yourself the I-cord to make, you know, the strand for your bunting. And then maybe you can practice knitting some triangles, just like basic shapes, and maybe use some really colorful yarns that you might have, attach them to the I-cord, and you've got this adorable bunting that you can hang up either for, you know, holidays or maybe in your kids' room or something like that. Now this one isn't exactly a knit project, but it's still a really clever way to use up, again, when you just have a little bit of leftover yarn and you don't think that it'll be enough for a full project. Tassels and pom-poms. These are so incredibly useful. You can attach them to literally any project that you want. Tassels, I think you can do even more with. One of the things that comes to mind, especially sort of as we move into the fall season, if you have some white yarn, you can make little tassels and add a couple of eyes and then just like some earring, you know, whatever they're called. Like, you can turn them into earrings and have adorable little ghost earrings for Halloween. I mean, super clever and creative, a fun way to use up little scrap bits of yarn. Now, when it comes to making tassels, you can buy these really handy tassel makers. I'll link a video that I have below where I show you how to use this and make a really quick and easy tassel. But just know that you don't have to have these tools. If it's something that you don't already have and you don't want to buy something additional, or you can't afford to buy these tools, you don't have to. If you have some type of object in your house that has kind of a square shape and about the size that you want for your tassel, you can get the job done that way. For the longest time, I would find just whatever I could. I used my crochet hook case at one point. You can use a book for like a really big tassel. You can even like cut up an old Amazon box or whatever into the shape that you want. You basically just need a frame that you can wrap everything around so that you can make the tassel. So this is available. I will link it in the description below if you're looking for something new. This has been great. I think it works really well. It's easy to use and it makes really nice tassels. Now pom-poms, again, you can make those by hand, or you can find tools that help make it a little bit easier. So these are also from the same company. These are Clover pom-pom makers, and they come in a variety of sizes. So you can make a pom-pom that is, you know, whatever size based on what you need for your project or based on the amount of yarn that you have left over. The finished pom-pom ends up being about as big as the maker in my experience. Sometimes they can be a little bit bigger or end up a little bit smaller as you trim them up and sort of tidy them up. But yeah, pom-poms and tassels. It's a great way to use up leftover yarn. Now this next one I am particularly excited about because it's what I have been wanting to use up a bunch of my leftover yarn for, and that's blanket squares. Blanket squares are perfect in so many scenarios. You don't need a ton of yarn. You basically set the size square that you want for your project as you will put it together later, and you can base that off of how much yarn you have available. So you can make smaller blanket squares, maybe 2" by 2" or 4" by 4", or you can make a 12" by 12" blanket square. Whatever you want to do, whatever you have the time for and the yarn for, blanket squares are just perfect. They're great little travel buddies, so perfect for this time of year because they can fit down easily in your purse. You don't have to have a ton of yarn, obviously, because they're for leftovers, but you don't have to have a ton of space or time to make them. So you basically will just knit up a square, put it aside, and join them later so that you have a beautiful scrappy yarn project. Kind of like granny squares a little bit, but for the knitting world. Not really, because they look completely different, but the same general idea applies. Now this next one is a really fun idea if you just have a little bit of scrap yarn and you just like to knit fun things that don't take a lot of time. And that's like cute little stuffed shapes or cute little flat shapes if you like that as well. So I've got this little heart knit pattern that's super easy and fun and quick to knit, and it only takes a handful of yards to accomplish. But I'm thinking if you knit 2 of these and you sew the ends together, you can stuff it a little bit and have an adorable stuffed heart. I think it's such a cute way to use up leftover bits of yarn. So this is one pattern, one idea, and I'll have this one linked in the description below. But yeah, check out cute little stuffed or cute knit shapes and turn them into little stuffed things that you can maybe use for other purposes. Now this next one, I have made a couple of these, and it's always my favorite like end of the year kind of project, especially when I have a bunch of leftover bits that I'm wanting to chip away at. And that's to knit wine bottle sweaters. These are just the cutest thing ever. I love knitting them for myself because we have a couple of wine racks out on display. And so I'll just add a wine bottle sweater to some of the wine bottles there, and it kind of adds to the seasonal decor of our home. But it's also really practical if you ever plan to gift a bottle of wine. I'm thinking, you know, even for like weddings or something like that, but obviously for the holidays, anytime that you would gift somebody a bottle of wine, why not knit it a little sweater? It's so simple, knitting a wine bottle sweater. I'll have a free pattern for this one in the description. It's super simple. You're basically just knitting a big tube with whatever colors you like and whatever leftover yarn you have available. And it just takes, you know, an hour or so to knit these up. Now this one is another end of the year kind of fall season favorite of mine, because I used to spend a ton of money buying all of those cute, adorable little pumpkins at the, you know, front of the store when you walk into, you know, Joann's back in the day, or Michael's, or any other like craft store, home decor store. You see just all these cute little pumpkins, and they're just so incredibly easy to knit, and they're perfect for leftover yarn. So I have a free pattern available with a video on how to knit this particular one. It's so incredibly simple, and you really don't need that much yarn at all or time to knit this. You will need a little bit of like polyfill stuffing, or if you want to get creative with what you stuff inside, you could use like tissue paper or something like that. So you don't need a lot of additional supplies, but you can get really creative with these if you want to. You can use a cinnamon stick for the little stem, and that smells really great. You can knit an I-cord for the stem. You can crochet a leaf if you want to, you know, kind of dive into the world of crochet a little bit. Or you can just take some like, what are they called? Silk flowers. You could take some like fake leaves and fake stems and fake flowers, and you can hot glue them. I mean, it's just the most perfect, fun little fall project, and it's a great way to use up scrap yarn as well. So I'll have that free pattern linked in the description below. You'll find tons and tons, again, on Pinterest or Ravelry if you search for those. Another one of those fun projects that's great for like the fall and winter season and only uses up just the tiniest little bit of yarn is a mug cozy. Now these for me have always been more of like a cute and fun thing to knit, more so than a practical thing, although I do see how they are practical. If the mug is a little bit too hot, it gives you a little bit of cushion for your hands so you don't burn them, but they're just fun to knit. So I've got this free pattern below. It's a great pattern to try if you're trying the world of cables, because this just has one simple cable twist, and it's perfect for those bulky yarns that you have in your stash. That's specifically what this pattern calls for, but you don't have to use bulky yarn for this. You could use 2 strands of medium weight yarn held together. As long as your gauge matches mostly, you can use that for this same mug cozy. But again, if you look on Pinterest or Ravelry, you'll find all sorts of free patterns and maybe paid patterns available for knit mug cozies. Maybe you also have some mugs kind of displayed on like a cute mug rack, maybe on your counter in the kitchen or something like that. You can knit up a few of these little mug cozies, and they just look really cute and pretty on your counter. It's also a really great gift if you know that somebody in your life really loves to drink coffee out of a particular mug, then you can make them a cute little mug cozy. Now this one is very close to a hat, but not quite. It's actually much quicker and much more simple, and that's a headband. I personally love knitting headbands. However, I don't tend to wear them much because I I think I look dumb in them. I think I just don't know how to wear headbands or something. They just don't look good on me. So I don't typically wear them myself, but I love gifting them to other people. I love making them and using up my leftover yarn for, because again, it's one of those projects where you just need a handful of yards of maybe 1 or 2 different colors. So I do have a free pattern for this headband. It's really simple, really easy. It's actually a great beginner project, although it might not look like it. It's so much easier to knit than what it actually looks like. So great for beginners if you're just learning how to knit in the round. It's also another great use for some bulky weight yarn because that's what this one calls for, and that's why it knits up so quickly. So knit headbands, whether you're knitting this little ribbed one that I have here or finding some other patterns available in books or online or in magazines, it's another great way to use up scrap bits of yarn. So the next time you have just a few minutes to spare, reach for your leftover yarn and knit something practical or maybe even just fun. You'd be surprised at how much enjoyment you get out of knitting a scrap yarn or a leftover yarn project, because typically they're much quicker to knit and it's great to have a quick win. But it's also really good to use up yarn that you otherwise had no clue what to do with. So it really is a win-win scenario, and it's something I would highly recommend you try if you have some leftover bits of yarn kind of piling and building up in your stash. Now, I did mention a few projects and free patterns and videos that I have personally on this channel and on my website. I'll link those in the description below if you want to check out some of those projects and maybe give them a try for your scrap yarn. But you know, this list, it really just scratches the surface on clever and fun projects that you can knit with your leftover in your scrap yarn. And I know you all are really creative at coming up with ideas, so let me know what you like to knit with your leftover and your scrap bits of yarn. I know I'll get a ton of inspiration from that, and so will others in the community. So thank you so much if you take the time to do that. Happy knitting, and I'll see you in the next one.